Okay.
Okay. That's right, it wasn't any good anyways. Just kidding. All right, so hi, I'm Michael Sturtz. Here's my story. That's me in first grade. And apparently the world was black and white back then. I don't know how that happened. I was born and raised right here in East Bay. My father groomed me to be an orthopedic surgeon because, well, he was an orthopedic surgeon. My stepdad ran an auto body shop, and I hung out there quite a bit. And my mom was the director of the Human Sexuality Program at UCSF. So it was a very interesting environment to grow up in. One of the things you learn in design thinking is that environment dictates behavior. I think what my saving grace was actually in second grade and third grade, I was part of a great experiment called the California Open Education Experiment, which lasted literally 2 years. And here was pretty much what I remember doing in San Miguel Elementary School, which was most importantly the group meditation on the purple rug, welcome to the 70s, soccer, woodworking, drawing ceramics, trading Star Wars cards, playing with the hamster, and we never had textbooks. I had 2 wonderful years of this experience, produced great pieces like this. I was very interested in things with wheels. That really hasn't changed. And then I got into 4th grade. Yes, that is me. Look at that style. And I really didn't know how to read or write or spell. And we later found out that I was dyslexic, but at the time we didn't really know. I ended up repeating 4th grade because the realm of the harsh reality of academics and the way that traditional school works at that time, still does pretty much, was a real affront to how I was experiencing my 2nd and 3rd grade, which were very formative for me. We went to our learning specialist, and this is almost verbatim of what they said, because I was interested in art, and I also was still being groomed to be an orthopedic surgeon. So they sent me off with the latest technology to help me, and I made it through school somehow. Fast forward 10 years. I wasn't allowed to go to art school because my dad was still holding on to the doctor idea, but I did go to a school that had art, and so I started making art pieces, and this is one of my first real art pieces in college, and I called it Hear Yourself because it was really about listening to your own voice versus an expert who had met me for 3 hours and told me I could never be an artist. So, there's a barrage of all sorts of crazy sculptures I made over the years. I did a whole series of organ appliances. I spent a year in Italy studying stone carving. And I was trying to find a vocabulary through my art to speak to people. And this is a facade of the Immaculate. So many churches in Italy, all based on this idea of Immaculate Conception. So on one side it was the church, sort of worshiping this perfect conception, and then my mom's influence as was more of it like vaginal, sperm, the whole like, this is actually how it works, so what if I asked that question? There's a lot of pieces like that. The ovarian bomber, pre-9/11, was a proposed public light sculpture in Chicago when I was in grad school, and they said it didn't have family values. It didn't represent family values. And then they told me if I was a woman, I could have gotten away with it. That's how it goes. I produced a show called Remains and Artifacts of the Dead Planet as my undergraduate thesis. I sort of took over the whole auditorium of the school because I had so much work that wouldn't fit in the gallery. And it was pretty appropriate because it was a very theatrical piece. It's the idea of alien anthropologists coming to this planet to figure out why we had become extinct, and digging up artifacts as a giant atomic blender or toxic waste capsule that was intentionally buried with markers, and these are actually the markers they use. And a whole bevy of porcelain and glass skeleton remains, large scale of things that sort of went on. So I realized the world didn't actually change when I had my big senior show. Everybody called it the meltdown. Like, I really thought I was going to like impact the world and get people to be more aware of global issues by having this art, And I saw sort of the limits of what sculpture could do as far as a impact socially. And I sort of came back to the Bay Area, did a whole bunch of different things, and then I sought out, I ended up going to graduate school and was inversely inspired by that. Found it to be, I think my favorite saying was, too many artists, not enough people. It was very competitive, and it wasn't really about making great art. It was about who could make their classmates cry through critiques. That made you really, really good at art school. If you could do that, it didn't matter what you made. So while I was there, I did the farming articles for a little place in Oakland now called The Crucible. And literally 6 months after graduating, I launched our first space, which was a 6,000 square foot space in West Berkeley, right off of San Pablo and Ashby.
Which year was it?
January 1999. The idea really was as simple as this: to inspire creativity in everyone, make it a non-competitive learning environment, make it a community where inspirational mentorship and the whole idea of being a beginner is really was a key element. It was sort of all the things that wasn't allowed in art school. And you know, I had gone to 4 undergraduate schools before I went to graduate school, sort of seeking the ideal environment and seeking this, you know, idea of what a teacher, in my mind, should be for sculpture. And I never really found it. So hang on a second, I sort of created that space and eventually became that teacher. This is the first Crucible space, and in Berkeley, and you know, you give a guy a t-shirt and suddenly you get a space like that in Oakland. It really doesn't work that way, but just take a look at that smile. Oh, Jerry, love you. But basically after about 3 years we moved to Oakland. I'll spare you the details. We raised $4.5 million in 3 months, and this was 2002. If you remember what was going on in 2002, not an easy time to raise money, but we had started enough of a track record in Berkeley to launch in Oakland. And now the Crucible is the largest nonprofit industrial art school in the nation. It's a very nice category. There's probably not that many in there, but there are other places like it, but nothing that has the breadth and width of programming and classes and facility. And you have all sorts of stuff if you haven't been there. It's pretty amazing. From glass blowing to metalworking, jewelry, all sorts of kids programs, all sorts of people coming here. So, you know, I was trying to expand my ripple effect of how can I make impact in the world with my art? Well, how about teaching or creating a space where a bunch of other people can have their own personal effect? And I really found that my own personal discovery of who I was through making really allowed me to evolve as a human being. And it almost made up for not going to medical school like I really wanted to. But it really is, and that's, you know, there's, I'll compare it when we talk about design thinking, that making sculpture or art is a very internal thing. You do it for yourself, maybe you share it for the world. But when you get into designing and creating something for someone else, you need to have a greater understanding than yourself. You need to have empathy for other people. And that is really, jumping at a very challenging conundrum. This is one of my favorite programs, and I think there's some people in the room that had something to do with it. Sudu has been running the bike program for a long time. Have you retired now? Is that official?
Kind of retired.
Yeah.
Semi-retired.
So one of our ways to outreach to West Oakland was to do the bike program, and we started with bicycle fix-a-thons, and I think the first one we had 12 bikes show up, and now it's about 80 a day, once a month. So kids can come in and get their bikes fixed. They can also earn bikes through dedicating time to work with mechanics. Again, free, get a free bike. And then this is one of the results of many classes called the art bike or hyphy bike, where kids we trick them into learning how to do metalwork just in service of them making super cool, dope rides that cruise around West Oakland.
Is this related to Scraper Bike?
Huh?
Is this related to Scraper Bike?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different things. But yeah, this program really sort of launched the youth program in West Oakland. We tried a whole bunch of other things to get communities in, but bicycles was really the gateway. One of our outreach vehicles I built as a class called, I think it was Fire Truck Restoration and Modification. This is a 1960 International fire truck merged with a PG&E utility truck. It's got a whole generator system. It runs a metal shop, glass shop, torch cutting, blacksmithing, and it makes a big bang when it shows up. So if you see my fascination with wheels continued, and the Crucible became this really great place for not only myself, but lots of people to take a concept. I wanted to build a biodiesel land speed record motorcycle by throwing a car motor into a motorcycle frame and taking it to the Bonneville Salt Flats and setting the world's fastest diesel motorcycle record, which I did with B100 biodiesel, and also sort of launched a whole new department in the Crucible around sheet metal forming all the aluminum fairings. A lot of my friends call that Michael's high-speed sculpture. Once you have, 8,000 students a year in a space, or to get 8,000 students a year in a space and have 100+ faculty of really talented people, you have a lot of creativity in one space and 56,000 square feet of horsepower to drive that. And part of sort of the result of it and the way that we got to be known was that we didn't have a marketing department, we didn't have professionals in fundraising, but I was pretty good at throwing parties, and so we started throwing all sorts of parties. And those parties became sort of the typical warehouse parties at the time, and then I got bored with that, and so I said, let's just do something a little more exciting. So on our 5th anniversary, we did fire operas and ballets, so Romeo and Juliet, Dido and Aeneas, but with lots of fire and with all sorts of handcrafted props, from propane fire swords to glass blowing, singing duets, to casting molten bronze on stage to make the spear that the opera singer killed herself with at the end of the opera, to the world's first motorcycle stunt rider ballerina duet in Stravinsky's Firebird set in the 70s, on and on. So it was a really nice departure for me to go from sculpture to creating a theatrical environment and a space where not only did the Crucible instructors need to be excellent at teaching, they also needed to be able to get on stage and do the Thriller or pour molten metal or bang anvils to a 30-piece live music ensemble, which was challenging for some of them. We did a bunch of fashion shows, and of course what got everybody excited was getting the Oakland Fire Department directly involved. I did a whole TED Talk around the idea of turning a no into a yes, and how you have to enroll people that are standing in the way of your dream to help you. And Fire Department was an excellent example of that. There was a lot of ways in which we courted them and invited them on stage to be part of it. And ultimately what really helped was that we set the standard for how fire effects and fire performance was done safely. We trained our own safety crew. We wrote a 50-page document of a fire safety plan. So we sort of out-regulated the fire department as far as satisfying them that we could be safe. And now, believe it or not, they just let us do whatever we want. They don't even show up unless they're coming as guests. We don't even have to pull a permit. Pretty amazing. This was, I'm still recovering from this. I think this was 2006. We did the Crucible's Fire Odyssey. 8,000-gallon moat of water outside. Amazing performers, built-in steam engines that pump steam through it, Tesla coils that made Zeus shoot lightning bolts, and that was sort of the finale of all that. So anyways, that environment really, even though it shows a lot of fire and fanfare and teached all the different aspects of sculpture, for me it was really revisiting my open education experience of like not dealing with spelling and writing and text and working with my hands and inviting people to learn and teach and share through all the other ways that there is, through movement, through expression, through their hands, through their creativity. 12 years to the day I retired, exactly, January 15th, took a year off. Because of this young lady right here, I got invited to Stanford dSchool to be a speaker. And somehow they just didn't let me leave, pretty much. And I got to work at the dSchool, and still do in some interesting ways. And I ran actually a program called Redesigning Theatre, which was looking at the next generation of live theatrical performance and entertainment using social media and technology. I didn't throw too many slides in there. But the exciting part was that I got to use design thinking as a means to drive that project. And so what's so amazing about the dSchool, other than it being in Stanford, is that it's its own little bubble within Stanford that really, when you propose a wacky class, they go, do you got anything crazier than that? They really want you to push those things, and they, really focus on these core values, radical collaboration, extreme users, all these things to really push the limits in a very interesting way. And design thinking, while there's times when I teach it to groups of mayors from China, entrepreneurs, they're looking for the formula of what it is. It's kind of like religion. I mean, there's parts of it you can use, parts of it you can leave, but it does have a framework. And what I found in that environment particularly was that I was teaching people to be creative again, or to find what they already were. I mean, let's show of hands. How many of you played with Play-Doh and crayons in first, second grade, right? I mean, you were decent, right? Thought you were pretty creative. Your parents probably kept them. How many of you are still doing that now? All right, well, this room is not the regular mindset. We're all probably, anyway. The thought was that most people, at some point, and this is what the research from the Creative Ignition Lab has found, is that people around age 10 to 12, well, I call them people, most people call them kids, start to lose their creative desires, or they put them down compared to their need to fit in, to be social, to achieve and do well in grades, and all those kind of things. And so that sort of goes away for a while. They get through school, they get a job, and then maybe mid-20s to early 30s, they go, hey, they kind of come back to it. So a lot of them come to places like the Crucible or Tech Shop, or go cut up a car and turn it into a Viking ship and go to Burning Man, or whatever it is. That there's a sort of a resurgence or reawakening, and some people it's in their 40s and 50s and 60s. A lot of people come to the dSchool to find out how to be creative or innovative, and so we use this process, and here's the little cheat sheet for it. The first one really is all about empathy and understanding, and there's a whole bunch of different ways we talk about it. And so this is exactly what I'm not supposed to do around design thinking, is really for me to explain it to you. We'd all just do an exercise for the next 3 hours. We could do that some other time, but that understanding, you find sometimes 25-year-olds, some of my students, don't really have the ability, especially these days it seems, to think outside of themselves enough to really gain empathy for other people, understand that, or they don't have enough self-awareness. So it's an interesting challenge that their creativity, especially around design, is limited by their self-awareness. So I'm actually very thankful of my group meditations on the purple rug in 2nd grade, because I think that actually is a huge element to self-awareness and all that to do this. So basically what happens is you empathize, you figure out the needs, you define those needs, you come up with interesting ideas, you share them in low-res prototypes, you get feedback, and you do it again. And there's a lot of research that shows that the people that do that kind of repetitive design work not only have a lot of fun, but they also really dig into understanding other people's needs. This is some of my Chinese workshops. This is the marshmallow challenge, where they have to build a marshmallow tower out of dried spaghetti and tape and string. And what they find is that they're not so good at it, and they think the triangle is the strongest form and that will save them, and it doesn't. And it's a design failure attempt, because what they end up learning is that the worst people at that are usually business school graduates. The best people are kindergarten graduates. Think about that. Why is that? There's a lot of reasons why that happens. So anyways, long story short, since Bureau outed me about having a Stanford lab but not being at Stanford, about a year ago, not even, 8 months ago, we launched the Stanford Creative Ignition Lab. It's located at Autodesk. We're trying to dive into visual, experiential, and embodied thinking to sort of understand and advance the future of learning and making. There's so many interesting pieces of technology and tools out there, but so many of them, including Autodesk's tools of software, are still pretty far away from where most people are creatively. So when I'm wanting to work on something, I don't really want to be on my computer, and the fact that I'm using my hands to communicate, to send emails all day instead of working in clay or carving or welding, really frustrates me. But Autodesk is a pretty interesting company. It's got a lot of forward-thinking components to it. They're diving and changing into all sorts of things. And really, I'm going to fly through some of this stuff. I did an Explorer program. We really tried to dive into what makes kids self-directed and resilient. I taught a class around exploring engaging learning with technology. And some of the results were, okay, we're not going to go through all that. And it seems like I just froze up too. Yeah, well, it's just catching up. So, really what we're looking at is a future when everybody can design, where design is really ubiquitous and it's democratized, where everybody is a designer. So just as an example, all of you are probably global photographers because your smartphone can take a photo and you can share it instantly with the world. When you're able to scan an object, I don't know what happened here. Oh, there we go. When you're able to scan an object, modify it, I'm just going to jump to right there.
3D scan.
3D scan an object, modify it and share it, print it just as easily. What's the world going to be like when everybody can modify their experience or their surroundings? So that's a lot of what we're looking at is the future of how that happens and what will be a professional designer's experience at that point. So one of the things that we're really interested in, I'm going to sort of end with this, is symbiotic learning. That every day you do tons of interactions with technology. You send an email, you write a piece of code, whatever. It's always a single-use, single-purpose interaction. There's no give and take. There's no learning for you or for your technology. And as AI sort of advances and we sort of see the efficiency of this, imagine your spell check actually teaching you how to spell. Imagine it able to say, hey, you know what, you're a phonetic speller, you're never going to spell that right. So next time I see you trying to spell accelerate with a EX, I'll know you're actually trying to spell accelerate this way. Same thing with GPS. What if your GPS actually helped you become a better navigator? What if it understood your driving patterns and your preferences and actually gained an understanding of who you are and how you drive? That's what we're exploring on one of the many levels. And you know, everybody thinks that's so impossible, or it's like, but actually, just if you use sci-fi as an example of a predictor of the future, I think it's Iron Man's Jarvis was a great example and inspiration for a lot of these ideas around, you know, how can technology really help us? So we often talk about a R2-D2 of design help, where you had a bit of computer, you know, just even if Siri would develop a little further and could actually understand what the hell you're saying, it's not that far off. So within that realm, where does learning go? You know, the idea that schools are the answer. I'm standing here inside a university. I work for a university, and I don't believe that universities have really evolved much in the last 100 years. And the ideas around a teacher and a student and how technology plays a part in that is really opening up right now. And you know, we are just at the forefront of playing with that. So I don't have an answer for what that is. I have a lot of things we're driving at, but what I've found is that through our research, the more technology you throw at a young person or an adult, the more you actually have to have that empathetic understanding. I'm working with a school called DSX that's launching actually within the walls of the Crucible. This is David Clifford who started East Bay School for Boys, is now launching this high school, and we're trying to be really intimately involved in this. And one of the things they do in the very first day is that the students build their own desks. And what a different idea. He also has some ideas around, let's get the students first and then we'll hire the faculty to meet the students' needs. I mean, it's such a radically different idea. We proposed an idea at Stanford around the idea of getting rid of majors altogether. And that you should have a mission statement and then advisors that help you achieve your mission statement. And there's so much, it's just like the political revolutions that are trying to happen. You have so much backlog of this is how we do things that it's very hard to change the system. But I think we're just starting to see that system sort of crumble and become less relevant. And so, and learning isn't something that, it used to be you spent your majority of your time in school, you went out and got a job, and then everything you wanted to do was outside of all that. And you learned to a certain point, and then you either ran out of resources or opportunities. Now, with technology, there's so many ways in which we can continuously learn, and that's what we're trying to pursue, is that kind of relationship. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you.